Hello and welcome to Arvos of Harvo. It is January, it is 2026, and as per every start of the year, we are going to take all the books from last year and build a small fortress. Okay, it's just as hard every year. This is a smaller wall than last year because I think a lot of the books I've been reading this year have been digital. So what I do have is each of these categories mostly laid out, hopefully easy to sort out. But overall, I think this year of reading was not as enjoyable as previous years. I think I've gotten a little bit too deep in the challenges, and next year I want to focus on some categories that actually do push me towards books that I otherwise wouldn't read. Whereas here, I think a lot of these I wanted to read for personal and, I don't want to say professional, but like creatively inspirational reasons, and that didn't always work out. So first category is the returning one, which is the Booker Prize winners, this little stack here. I thought I would have more spare time this year, so I chose to pick out some of the bigger ones. I read most of the long winners of the Booker Prize. They are varyingly good. I think I've been having trouble with the Booker Prize so far because any statement to say that one individual book, even if we are self-selecting from Commonwealth countries in the early history of the prize, but also literary novels, it's still hard to say that one book is the best one of the whole year. And to say that about some of the ones I've read here just doesn't feel great, because I may not have read anything else from that year, but I know for a fact there's no way that some of these books were the best of the best that year. That being said, though, there were some that were really, really enjoyable, and I think for what I will remember from the Booker Prize winning novels that I've read this year is definitely The Luminaries. The Luminaries is such a complicated, detailed, and obsessive work. It's so meticulously researched and it's so carefully planned and thought out. Even as though there's, I think the audaciousness to it at times can be a weakness, because I wouldn't call it a particularly realistic novel. Even though it's historical fiction, there are just tremendous coincidences and uncertainties that are just baked into the plot in order to make this mystery work. Though it is still, for the most part, like a really, really enjoyable reading experience. I just really liked being transported into that world, and it was so different as well from what I expected from a Booker Prize winner. So yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a good time. I will be continuing this category, sadly, next year. I hopefully will finish them, and then we can put that to bed, but we'll see. Next category is books that I read specifically because I wanted to. That's this stack here from The Broken Shore downwards. So we'll move this away out of sight. These books are ones that have been on my shelf forever, and I just need an excuse to read them. And they're all pretty good. I wish my reading life was this easy to say, oh hey, I just want to read that, so that's what I go for. But hopefully it does show that I have still quite diverse tastes, and I also really like to take recommendations. So I read How to Read an Autobiographical Novel, actually borrowed that from a friend from their recommendation, and since then have recommended it to multiple people. I just think it's such a interesting work that relays on the ideas of the self and creativity, and how often when we're writing about ourselves, we need to have this conversation with ourselves to figure out who we are and what we want to portray to the world. What meaning does our story have to the world? I think it's still very well and interestingly thought out book. But really the one that stands out to me, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but Breathing Lessons by Anne Tyler. This is a book that I'm going to continue to remember. This is just such an ordinary American couple going about a not usual, but still like quite banal day, and yet we see these people so clearly. You get so much sympathy for these people that are just set in their ways, and in some ways trapped into patterns of dissatisfaction, and yet they're so critically human. I just really, really enjoyed the way these characters were constructed, and also very, very easy to read as well. And of course, Gilead, but we just talked about that in December, and that's my favorite book of all time. There's not too much to say about that, aside from it's good. It's really, really good. Right beside them are the books that I read because I did not want to read them. These ones are things that, again, have been on my shelf. They are challenge reads. A lot of these are things that I thought, if you'd asked me just as I started this channel out in 2021, if I would ever read any of these books, Portrait of a Lady, Middlemarch, Tenant of Wildfell Hall, would I ever finish these novels? I probably would have said no. I would have been happy living my whole life not knowing what goes on in these books. And having finished them, I mean, it's nice. Like, I like being part of the conversation, and it is interesting to see how ideas evolve. Some of these have been much more interesting to think about than to actually read. The Scarlet Letter, for example, is just a fascinating book that is not enjoyable to actually read word for word, sentence to sentence, but just the thoughts of morality and, I guess, wearing your identity and wearing what people think of you on your sleeve like that and claiming who you are is still such an interesting point. And I'm glad that this book exists to start that conversation, as much as I am also very glad that I don't need to be a teacher making students read it. But the surprise for me is really Love Medicine. So I took a long time to read this because I did not like the cover, and I thought I would be very embarrassed reading this in public. In fact, I chose to read this during a week when I was sick, and I knew that I wouldn't be out in public just because I don't really understand what's going on in this cover. I don't know if it's like a TV show or a movie adaptation that led to this photograph, or I just don't know the story. But this is a sequence of connected short stories. It is a really gorgeous portrait of a Native American community and the love and the heartbreak they face and the generational stories that they share as well. I love being able to see these characters from different angles, and I'm starting to think that this is one of my favorite tropes, is seeing a character when they're 20 and seeing them again when they're 40s, and then seeing them again when they're 60. I love being able to see a character evolve over time and to theorize and interpret what about a person stays stable and what about them changes, and what events affects the way that people see the world so cataclysmically that they are a different or an unrecognizable person in their 40s versus their 20s. Like, I find that so interesting, and I think this book does that really well. Next category, these ones are my yearly challenge books. So midway through next year, I'll have finished this challenge where I read a book from every year from 1900 to, I guess, now 2026. These ones are wrapping up the last of the ones I've missed. Most of them are from the 1900s, 1910s, very, very early in that century, and it's pretty hard to get into some of these. I think the world has changed so much, and I guess that's why I'm doing this challenge, is I like the idea of looking at any one particular decade, looking at the books that came out that year and thinking, well, what does the world look like? And what were people thinking and believing and enjoying as well? What kinds of books were being popular, and what kinds of books have been remembered and endured over this period of time? What are the books that are emblematic of a particular period? I think I am learning a lot more as I'm reading this, even though it hasn't been the most enjoyable journey, and I don't know if I would say any of these books have been particularly amazing for me. I guess The Age of Innocence. So The Age of Innocence to me really stands out, but I think it stands out to me in spite of the time it was written in. So despite being a novel written in, I believe, the 1920s, yes, the winner of the 1921 Pulitzer Prize, it feels like a very contemporary romance novel. It feels like it could be historical fiction that was written 10 or 20 years ago. I think it's just such a powerful story of the interplay between emotional love and social class, and the way that our affection for people can be true and different. Like, one person can have deep, deep love for two people, both romantically, but for very different reasons. And that's what happens in this book, is that there is no correct or right or acceptable answer. It is more just a case of, but who are you? What do you believe in? What matters to you? And that's a story that is never really going to change. So I appreciated this for the picture of the world it gave me, but I also appreciate it just for its very timelessness. the lower half of books here, so I'm not going to pick them up, but these are my spooky books. I'm thinking of ghosts and haunted houses, books that reflect not necessarily like outright horror, but a sense of uncertainty or unnervingness or unease, because that is the kind of feeling that I want to work into a creative piece that I'm working on right now. So over the course of a year, I looked at some really classic horror texts like Hell House and Carrie, just really seminal texts. But I think the one that stood out for me by far has been House of Leaves. I think to make a text truly scary, truly unnerving in this way, and to play with the reader's understanding of what is real, what is believable, and how does fiction actually relate to the reader, that House of Leaves at times is a book that doesn't want to be read or understood, and that takes the reader on tangents and trails and confusing little curios, and ultimately still remains this very, very unified aesthetic work. I just think it's such a wonderfully crafted book that is certainly worth a read. The rest of these are interesting in various ways. I love the way that ghosts are represented so differently across each one, whether it's a very scientific method like in Hell House, or in a very uncertain way like in The Seven Moons of Marley Almeida. I like that each book had to establish for itself the logic of ghosts, like what is a ghost in this novel, what is a ghost in this universe, and what effect does it have on the existing world. Being able to go on that journey and to figure it out as a reader, and to then hit that point where actually the ghosts are real and there's stakes now, but what does that mean in the context of this particular book, has always been interesting, and I think will continue to be interesting. I think this is why ghost stories continue to be so enduring, and I hope that's something that I can work into what I'm doing as well. My next set, something light. I wanted to pick books that would be quick and easy to read, and these were. I find that whenever I do a something like category, so this is the second time I've done a category like this, I tend to just pick bestsellers. I will go to a used bookstore, find whatever's popular or whatever's well-known, and I'll just read that. So lots of things in here: Dictionary of Lost Words, Lessons in Chemistry, Conversations with Friends, Leave the World Behind. These are all books that, to me, are very popular, very easy to find in Australian bookstores, very commonly talked about, and digestible. Like, I would say that none of these books are particularly political in any way, even though I would say that they're all very feminist, and they're all very marked about their representation of social movements, but it's often done in a historical lens, or a lens where it's not polemical. I think they're very happy to celebrate things, like celebrate social achievements and progressive movements, but not actually be at the forefront of those movements themselves. So I guess it just makes for bestseller material. Like, it's not a novel that's going to offend or confuse anybody. It's just a novel that you can read and feel good about yourself, which sometimes is certainly necessary, but is not my favorite kind of reading. So I don't think I gave a single 5-star to any of these in this section. I think I just thought, you know what, they're okay. They pass the time. But I certainly would want reading to do more than just pass the time, so I'll set that aside. This little space is a placeholder for the 11 Shakespeare plays that I read this year. It's so funny. So now that I'm well and deeply into this challenge of finishing all the Shakespeare plays, this year has been reading a lot of the ones that are lesser known, less performed, and there's definitely a good reason for that. I think of all the 11 plays, which I'm going to flick on the screen now, none of them are good. They're all kind of bad in their own way, and it's very clear why it would be hard to find a performance of any of these, is because they're all kind of either deeply flawed or very derivative. They are often worse versions of more popular Shakespeare plays. Like the Henry VI plays, both 1 and 2, are kind of just worse versions of Macbeth. Like, I get that they're histories, and I get that they're real human kings in English history, but the narrative structure of this witchy woman that is trying to upset the social order by conniving a king onto the throne, I think is just told so much better in Macbeth. And the need to make this historical claim in a lot of these history plays, I think, kind of weighs it down. I think Shakespeare is interested in these historical figures and interested in portraying them in a particular moral lens. And I'm sure that's very interesting to study in an academic sense. But as a reader, it's not that great. And a lot of these plays to the very imperialist undertones of England at the time, like Elizabethan and Jacobean England, become much more apparent. And when I finish these plays, I think I've got maybe 3 or 4 left to go. I'll finish the plays and I'll do a big retrospective on all of them, and I think that's probably what I'll find, is that yes, the ones that I've endured, the plays that are continually performed, the really big famous ones like the Hamlets and the King Lears and the Romeos and Juliets, those ones do find their enduring relevance. But to look at the whole body of work of Shakespeare, I think there are recurring themes and tropes and ideas about society, about monarchy, and about male and female relationships and gender dynamics that are very, very hard to ignore. So that's probably what I'll end up talking about, and then I'll say that Shakespeare is done, I'll never read another play again, and I'll be done, I'll be happy, I'll never have to worry about this. And lastly, book a day. So this big pile is the set of novellas and other short things that I read, one per day in February. I have my second pile ready to go over here. Kind of scrounged out all my novellas and everything so that I would have this reasonable pile. It's so funny that I've been doing this for, I think this year was my 3rd year that I've done Book a Day February. Next year will be the 4th. Because I do this, it lets me get to 100 books a year at the end. And like, for the sake of numbers, and for the sake of getting a really wide breadth of reading, different genres, different styles, different authors, I think it's very useful. I do think there's a lot of books from this challenge that I just don't remember very well because I read them too quickly, and it's a bit ungraceful, or I guess unkind, to a reader or to an author in a book to do that. But certainly I enjoy it. Each time, as much as I joke about how much suffering I'm going through by the sleep deprivation, it is an enjoyable month, and it is something that I actually kind of look forward to. When I pick up novellas at used bookstores, I do often think, oh, I get to put this in my February pile, and I get to go on this big whirlwind journey through literature every February. Like, it's pretty cool. So I guess it's going to continue. This year's set, less famous books, certainly. I can't remember any that really stand out, but it's also been almost an entire year, so yeah, it is what it is. And just to very quickly, my top 5 in 2025. So number 5 is going to be Translations by Jumana Abdu. This is an Australian novel about a Palestinian woman who is moving to a farmstead in regional New South Wales. And it's about the relationships that she has with the regional imam of that area, and also the some Kamilaroi people at a hospital that she works at. I find that the way that this book represents culture and identity and land and history as well, all of it just intertwined very neatly. But what sticks with me is just how complicated the prose is, that nearly every sentence, you read it and then you read under it, that the dialogue is so layered because we have characters that are quite reserved and quite cerebral, they have a lot of history, and they are able to interpret each other's language in a way that is much more complex than what's going on at face value, and it teaches the reader to do that as well. It's, in many ways, a kind of anxiety-inducing book because it makes me think so much more about the conversations that I have. But in these times of global uncertainty and of really, really complicated social and political situations and so much injustice in these certain elements of the world as well, being able to negotiate these contradictions is something that I value a lot. And the book, the way this book is written has enlightened me in that sense. It has helped me feel more confident in the way that this book is written. I think reflects that complexity. It is appropriate for how difficult it is to talk about things like First Nations sovereignty and migration, of being Muslim in Australia, and how relying on your family and relying on your community can sometimes be a strength and a weakness at the same time. I think it's just very detailed and complicated, and I'm very happy that I had a chance to read this year. Number 4, The Age of Innocence, just very simple, clean, and emotional book. I will continue to remember this. I just think that the it's just a very well done love triangle. Like, there's just not much more to say about it. Sometimes the trope done well is just gorgeous. It just sings. And I think the dignity and the complexity offered to each of the characters here is really, really remarkable. So, Age of Innocence, good book. Number 3, I'll give it to Breathing Lessons. I am a big fan of American realism. I just think that seeing a human being for what they are and embodying, or at least coming to terms with, the flaws that we have and will continue to have, I think is such a beautiful theme. And I think this novel does that really, really well. We get characters that are in their own way kind of insufferable, but they're given so much grace and so much forgiveness that it's still just enjoyable and pleasant to read. It's like a friend that you've been with forever, that even the little things that they do that kind of annoy you, they're part of who they are. They're just very endearing in that sense. And it's a book, to me, about learning to love anybody, of being able to see someone for who they really are, and to spin a positive on something that... Do I agree? It's been a positive on something that's actually kind of damaging in terms of their personality, but to really just see them, to see so clearly who a person is and why they do the things they do, how they became that person, and what their actions are going to result in. I think it'll always be fascinating to me. Like, maybe it won't be inspirational, but it'll always be interesting. So, Breathing Lessons by Anne Carlyle. I enjoy it. I understand why lots of people don't. But yeah, I would say that's my number 3 of the year. Number 2 is the book that engrossed me the hardest, is House of Leaves. This book just absolutely I sunk right into it. I just can't explain how magical the experience of reading this is, because for a good week and a half, my life was just living and breathing House of Leaves. It was just theories and hypotheses and symbols and everything. It was just such a unique and detailed experience. It's just such a rich work. And being able to speak with it with a friend of mine as well, actually talking about what struck us about this book and all the different kind of angles and dead ends and twists and turns it could take, but also how all of that is so mirrored in the structure of the house itself. It's just a really, really enjoyable read, surprisingly, and it reveals a lot about ourselves too. It reveals a lot about what we find scary and what we find to be our obsessions, how we locate meaning in our lives, in a sense. Is that, do we locate it in the stories we tell, or the spaces that we inhabit, the people that we care about, or the acts of dominance or forgiveness that we enact? Like, it is admittedly a pretty masculine book, but I do think that it's just good. It's just done really well, and all of the risks and experiments with structure, to me, really pay off. So yes, House of Leaves, greatly enjoyed. And lastly, number 1, This Is Cheating. Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. Makes me feel so many emotions, guides me through some really difficult questions I have about life and existence and all of that. Just a really gorgeous book. I love the character voice. I love the way it doesn't shy away from these really challenging questions, but it also doesn't give definitive answers or really try to. It just lets us sit with how hard it is sometimes to work things out, how hard it is to show love to people, and how hard it is to give and accept forgiveness. It's just a really, really wonderful work. I will probably be singing this book's praises forever. I will be reading it again in 5 years' time, and in 10 years' time, and in 15 years' time, and however long I live. I think it's going to continue being meaningful to me. So, Gilead, fantastic read. Very glad I got the chance to read this again this year. Alright, and thank you for joining. That has been the books of 2025. In total, I think 103 books, but cheating a little bit because 10% of those are Shakespeare plays and those are a bit shorter. Next year, I am going for the same goal, but I'm trying to be a bit more reasonable. My commute is just not as long as it used to be, and I want to enjoy reading more. I want to pick categories that are going to surprise me, delight me, confuse me, do things that are unconventional in terms of my reading habits. So that is what to expect for the coming year. I also want to talk a bit about reading goals. So in a couple of days or weeks, I don't know, however timing goes, hopefully we'll make a video about how many books do we plan to read in a year? And what does that say about our reading lives and our habits? How does that affect our lives and how we plan our time to read and how we see stories in general? So hopefully that will be done and interesting, but we'll see. Okay, thank you for joining. I will see you next time.